This year's been kind of an interesting journey for me with learning about lenses, and I just felt like it might be worth talking about it a little bit. This is not an ultra structured discussion, but um, I would guess that there are other people out there that are curious or interested in some of the same things that I've been in testing ways to get different looks, benefits to certain kinds of lenses in certain situations. I feel like I've seen a progression in my own career, going from sort of photo lenses. Like I had an old Tamron lens that I used to use with my original Blackmagic camera. Certainly use the Sigma art lenses a lot with the Red Komodo, G Masters with various FX cameras. Then, in the past few years, I feel like more and more people got into using vintage lenses to find, distortions and character that sort of muddies up or just makes more interesting the ultra clean digital sensors. And a lot of those vintage lenses could be had for cheap. And then on top of that, then they start to be used in bigger movies as well. The Helios 44-2 and some of the Zeiss Jenna lenses, among many others. Then the next phase that I feel like I participated in and saw was the increasing access to new anamorphic lenses that are beautiful but not insanely expensive, still expensive, but not insanely expensive. And the progression of these experiences really had me fully locked into the idea of distorting the image as much as possible. Maybe not actually as much as possible, but distorting the image, making it grittier, having kind of stuff that goes a little weird in the out of focus distortions, the three dimensionality of anamorphic lenses. And I think that's kind of where my focus was on the more like narrative artsier stuff that I was working on or inspired to try to make. But in the meantime, I also am hired to shoot a lot of fashion work. And while I have used vintage lenses and anamorphic lenses in that work, typically the clients are wanting something that's not quite as extreme as that. There's still plenty of run and gun gigs that I do where the flexibility of a Sigma art zoom or the autofocus of a Sony G Master lens is absolutely the correct choice. But for those gigs that I wanted to try to up the level of my image, while still fitting within the creative parameters of the jobs that I was getting hired to do, it got me interested in looking at quality cinema glass that is not overly distorting, that is fairly accurate. And there's a lot of amazing options out there right now. You can find reviews all over the place for DZO lenses and for the Nisi Athenas and many others that are coming out, the Doolins. But what I started to notice actually as I kind of did more and more research on these things is I just started to notice that actually a lot of the movies that I like, that I think of as being full of character, are often not shot on lenses that are massively distorting the image. I mean, the most obvious examples of that is Roger Deakins' work. He's pretty well known for liking to have a fairly clean image out of his camera and his lens. Chivo, who's done a lot of amazing work, he often distorts the world through use of ultra wide lenses, but still fairly clean. It's free of vintage distortions and anamorphic distortions. And so that started to be the thing I was looking for as I was renting out different lenses and trying different lenses. And I mean, to be honest with you, initially there were gigs that I did where I rented certain lenses, certain sets of prime lenses that were budget, and there were shots that I liked that I got with them. And then there were situations where I'm pretty confident they were no better than my Sigma art zooms, maybe actually worse in certain cases. And so buying a set of primes that was going to give me that kind of performance was not something I was completely convinced by, not to mention workflow downsides. To me, with primes and suit versus zooms, there's obvious downsides, which is that you have to change lenses. And so it's slower and searching for shots sometimes is a little more rigid. I actually think on the flip side, there's an upside to shooting with primes as long as you have enough time to where it's not absolutely ridiculous to change lenses. I think that there are times where if you have a creative vision, for example, I want to shoot something at a longer focal length on average for this project, or I want to shoot something at a wider focal length for this project, having a prime lens focal length on your camera can encourage you to stick to that plan. Instead of zooming in for a closer shot, walk the camera closer and see what that looks like. A close up in a wide angle lens looks very different from a close up with a medium or a long lens. This is all to say there's no right or wrong lens for all occasions. There's no right or wrong prime versus zoom or photo lens versus anamorphic lens versus vintage versus cinema glass. It very much is dependent on the tool for the job. But what I ultimately landed on for me was that I wasn't happy enough with the budget primes that I was renting to invest that kind of money in because I just didn't feel that the overall upside of what I was getting was definitely better or more exciting than just using the high quality photo zoom lenses that I was already using. Um, and that's when I found a set of primes that was more expensive than what I was planning on investing in, but so clearly good that it made it worth it for me to do that. And that's the Tokina Vista Primes. They're lenses that have been out for quite a while. They've been used on various TV shows and movies, lots of indie productions. I had rented them once before a long time ago on a fashion shoot that I did with the Red V Raptor because they cover VistaVision, but what I found with them is exactly what I was looking for. In addition to incredible build quality and all the flexibility you could want in terms of sensor coverage, because they cover anywhere from VistaVision down, and they all open to T2 across all focal lengths. But they really offered me that clean look that still, to me, had character, if that makes sense. I think a lot of times the way we think of lenses that are clean is as clinical. But I think what I started to realize as I was looking at lots of movies that are using great spherical lenses that aren't particularly distorting, but still are producing images that are really stunning. What you start to notice is that there are other things than how the bokeh looks that affect how we react to an image. And so, yeah, I tried those Tokina Vistas out. I like them. I bought three lenses initially, the 21, the 40, and the 85, which was primarily for being used on my Red Komodo Super 35 sensor. So it gave me a moderately wide lens, but not the 21's not crazy wide on Super 35. A 40, a slightly wider than a 50, and then a long lens, an 85, which I used on a couple projects and loved, loved, loved. And then eventually decided to fill out the set with two more lenses that kind of filled the gaps with a 29 and a 65. There's plenty of reviews about these lenses. They've been out for a while. I think my main point was not to say, oh, go buy these lenses. They're expensive, they're heavy. That's the really the only downside to me is they're very heavy lenses. It's more, I just encourage you to try different lenses in real shooting environments because I don't know if the things that I've really fallen in love with these lenses are things that I would have necessarily noticed in any kind of way that would have made me emotionally invested in using them if I was just shooting focus charts or for that matter even looking at other reviews online. It was very much putting them on a camera I knew really well and shooting in situations I knew really well and then doing the editing and the color grading and really seeing not only did I like the images that came out of it, but how the workflow of using those lenses led me to get different kinds of shots than I probably would have gotten if I was just rocking my normal 24 to 70 zoom on there. Yeah, some of that is being able to be more open at a wide focal length. I really, really like how the 21 mil at a T2 looks on a Super 35 sensor because you're getting a little bit of wide angle distortion, but it's not crazy. It's still pleasing in my opinion. But with it at a T2, you can still control the depth of field. That's one example of something that I like. I think that the way the contrast feels is just natural. It doesn't get too crunchy to me. It is sharp in that I feel like the images really pop. There's detail, but to me it's quite pretty actually. There's a gentleness to it. So it's interesting because this lens is talked about as being so sharp, but actually again, sharp maybe yes. In fact, I'm sure it is because I've seen people show it technically that it's sharp, but that doesn't mean clinical. It actually, to me, has a really pretty feel to it, one that's very pleasing. Whether it's borrowing lenses from other friends, if you're so lucky to be in a city that has a good share grid setup, you can rent lenses for really cheap. I just think that the way that you can learn what kinds of lenses that you're interested in and like is by trying them yourself, getting the tool on the camera you like and go shoot something. And frankly, try it a lot before you invest in it, because there still are plenty of shoots, even having this set of 5 Tokina lenses, where I don't take them out. Like if I don't have an AC pulling focus for me, or I know there's not enough time for me to switch lenses, or I just want the flexibility to change focal lengths on the fly because it might be important while I'm searching for a frame. I don't know what lens length I want to be at. Autofocus on the G Masters. I mean, there's times where the autofocus on an FX3 with a G Master lens on there is it's incredible. It makes your life easier. And if there's not time to properly shoot with the Prime, I'd rather have the peace of mind that allows me to keep my mind in a creative mode, which is going to be the zoom lens with the autofocus. So in no way am I suggesting that buying is the solution to everything. But I do think that in this case, I can say that I've landed in a place with lenses that I didn't expect to. I never at the beginning of this year would have thought that I would be buying those lenses. And I'm really, really happy with them now that I have them. The journey of learning what it is that interested me about them, what appeals to me about them, was something that occurred through the process of trying different lenses out, reading about them, watching tests, but most importantly, renting them and trying them. To me, that's a lot of the fun of filmmaking, is to learn what you like and how to get what you like through using different tools and skills. So yeah, that's all I got for now. And yeah, I'll try to keep them coming.